So there's no reason to really monitor everyone's conscious decision of food as far as it becoming a religious thing and a cult-like thing.
Within this whole anti-woke phenomenon, people will say things like we must be willing to have difficult conversations, that we must seek out disagreement, that we must be willing to challenge the beliefs that we already hold. But the moment you try to have a conversation about animal rights and challenge what people believe on this issue, then you've gone too far. You're monitoring them now. Now it's a cult-like thing. For a moment, just think of the serious irony of saying you should. On my YouTube channel, I spend a lot of time refuting woke anti-veganism. I'll talk more about how I do that exactly later on in my video, but for today, I'll be responding to Kimi Katiti, who is more anti-woke and who makes the case against veganism in her video, How Woke Sensitivity Might Send You to the Hospital. Now, before we get to the part where she discusses veganism, she talks about obesity. I don't have an opinion on that subject, but I would like to play a few clips from that segment so that all of us can take a note of the way she thinks. And we'll see later on in this video that this just completely flips around when she reaches the discussion on animal rights.
Going around. I wish that we would have more compassion, that our compassion would go further than just like our own egos, because I feel like the reason we don't criticize obesity that much is that we just don't want to look mean. But it's like, what if our compassion went a step further? But now, because of woke sensitivity, we want to accommodate everyone.
So now that we've done that, let's take a look at what she has to say about veganism and animal rights.
Not having a moral compass or not having an operating system like my friend Will Roosh talks about. When you don't acknowledge religion, and for me, my faith is rooted in Christianity, you tend to look for things that are indicators of being a good person. So looking after people who are marginalized, that kind of comes in with that upside down view on obesity, where of course, like in the media, we have ostracized plus size people, but because we want to care for the marginalized, we want to care for those who are pushed to the corner, we say, okay, I'm the type of person who looks out for those sorts of people. When it comes to veganism, there's sort of this, again, this morality with, I'm the type of person who looks after animals and I don't want animals to die.
No, that's not what veganism is. Veganism is not the morally good thing. It's the morally neutral thing. Vegans don't necessarily save animals or help animals. Vegans just say, look, I will not actively provide funding for the killing and exploitation of these animals. That's all. Now, Kimi, you draw an analogy between marginalized humans and other animals. The analogy that you've made is a good analogy, but you're correlating the wrong things within that analogy. You're correlating veganism to something like anti-racism, to helping the disadvantaged. But veganism is more like non-racism, which is simply not actively participating in harming the disadvantaged. Veganism is not the sort of woke, you must always be fighting racism kind of thing. Veganism is just like the morally decent, you should not be a racist kind of thing.
When it comes to veganism, there's sort of this, again, this morality with, I'm the type of person who looks after animals and I don't want animals to die, and you are all bad for killing animals. And
how did you conclude that? It's more like, I know you're a decent person and I know that you're capable of reaching this very basic standard that we ought not to take someone's life away, that we ought not to torture someone for our trivial pleasure. If I thought you were a bad person, would I not think that that's just how you are and that you will always be contributing to unnecessary animal suffering and that there is no point in trying to convince you? That's what I would do if I thought you were a bad person, but I don't think that you're a bad person, and that's why I try to convince you. You know, it's interesting because earlier you mentioned Will Roosh.
Like my friend Will Roosh talks about.
And if we are talking about the same Will Roosh, and I'm guessing that we are, then he's a solid guy. And a while ago, William shared this satirical comic on his Instagram story, and it was sort of archived by a different account. And this comic that he shared It makes fun of woke people who attribute bad motives to their opponents. But ironically, while criticizing vegans, whom you've mistakenly thought of as being all woke people, you're doing that very thing.
When it comes to veganism, there's sort of this, you are all bad for killing animals.
You're doing the very thing that the woke people whom you're criticizing do. Even on this issue, I could just shut up and avoid seeming like a mean person to so many people. But as you rightly point out, we should extend our compassion beyond this willingness to not seem like mean people and respect the person in front of us enough to have an honest conversation with them.
We all as humans have this sort of religious gene. Even when you say that you're an atheist, there still comes in a sort of, you're searching for some standard by which you want to be a good person. So oftentimes that might come with caring for animals because you see yourself as being superior to animals, you have command over the animals, and you see them as kind of defenseless things that we're abusing, killing, and that sort of thing.
That's just upside down, isn't it? I also would not pay for any human being to be killed for my trivial pleasures. Does that mean that I think that I'm superior to every other human being? No. By contrast, if I did pay for a human being to be killed for my trivial pleasure, then the necessary conclusion of that is that I must think that my trivial pleasure is of more importance than the life and liberty of the human being for whose death and torture I just paid for. The same goes for animals. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, a like on this video and a sub to the channel would be superior than not doing those things.
Think about the fact that farming crops actually kills a lot of rodents and a lot of creatures just the same.
No, not just the same. It takes far more crops to feed the animals, to then kill and eat the animals, than if we grew crops directly to eat the crops. For example, it takes about 25 kilograms of grain to produce just 1 kilogram of beef. Or consider the fact that animal agriculture takes up 83% of global farmland but produces only 18% of the calories that human beings consume. Please take a moment here to realize that the remaining over 80% of calories consumed by humans is produced by plant agriculture, and it does so while not even taking the same amount of land, but rather by taking several times less amount of land. References to peer-reviewed scientific studies will be linked in the description box if you're watching this on YouTube. We can't survive without eating, right? We have to eat. And by eating only plants, it allows us to spare not only the lives of the trillions of animals whom we kill every year, it also allows us to minimize the amount of crop-related deaths that you're referencing. You see, veganism is not a purity thing. Veganism is a not causing intentional unnecessary suffering when we have the option to not cause that suffering thing.
We need to survive. The other animals in the animal kingdom don't have any problem with attacking their prey for food, so there's no reason to really monitor everyone's conscious decision of food.
That's because other animals have moral worth but not moral agency. For example, human babies have moral worth but not moral agency. If I kill the human baby because I get some pleasure out of it, you'd say that's pretty immoral. I shouldn't do it. But human babies don't have moral agency, right? So if a human baby punched me, you would not hold that baby morally responsible. The same goes for other animals, regardless of their age.
So there's no reason to really monitor everyone's conscious decision of food. As far as it becoming a religious thing and a cult-like thing to monitor everyone's speech about meat and make everyone follow this one trend.
Okay, amongst other things, this is what I really dislike about the whole anti-woke phenomenon, where they become just like the woke left that they're criticizing. Within this whole anti-woke phenomenon, people will say things like we must be willing to have difficult conversations, that we must seek out disagreement, that we must be willing to challenge the beliefs that we already hold. But the moment you try to have a conversation about animal rights and challenge what people believe on this issue, then you've gone too far. You're monitoring them now. Now it's a cult-like thing. For a moment, just think of the serious irony of saying you should not question people choosing to fund the exploitation and killing of other animals, and then accusing anyone who does question it of being cult-like. Ladies and gentlemen, conspecifics, have you heard of anything more ironic than that this week? I have not.
Religious thing and a cult-like thing to monitor everyone's speech about meat and make everyone follow this one trend is something that harms you in the sense that you might be robbing your body of nutrition that it needs with meat, but also the fact that you're kind of bringing yourself into these chains of self-censorship. That was a prison for me. I experimented with veganism for a while, and let me tell you, the only thing that you get is a sense of like superiority, but otherwise I just felt like super frail, super fragile. Was not good for my health at all. But it works for certain people. If it works for you, good. But just know that for a lot of people, there's no need to force everyone into this one way of eating.
Again, we are not forcing anyone. We're just trying to have a conversation. The entire point of your video, Kimmy, is to criticize woke sensitivity. But by falsely labeling conversations as forcing, you're espousing woke sensitivity. Words are not violence, and having conversations is not forcing people. By contrast, putting a knife to someone's throat to then slit their throat so that you can eat their flesh is indeed violence. That is indeed an act of forcing. You're forcefully taking away the life of someone who doesn't want to die. Secondly, what you've just done here by making conclusions about the health effects of veganism based on your experience is what woke people would refer to as making an argument from lived experience. Of course, these were previously known as making arguments from anecdotal evidence. Now, as Ayishat Akanbi has pointed out, a valid lived experience doesn't make your conclusion about that experience true. Although I must clarify that Ayishat Akanbi made this point more generally, but it does apply here. We cannot be making general conclusions based on anecdotal evidence. We have to look at the entire body of evidence. So let's do that. The American Dietetics Association, which is the largest organization of nutrition and food experts in the United States, has stated officially that vegan diets are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. The British Dietetics Association has affirmed the same. Links to both official statements will be in the description box. Again, only if you're watching this on YouTube. The reason you might have had a bad experience was probably because you were not eating properly. Like, if I ate chicken nuggets all day, every day for the next month, I will probably get sick before the month even ends. It would be completely irrational for me to conclude on that basis that non-vegans cannot be healthy. You can be extremely unhealthy as a non-vegan or a vegan, and you can be healthy as a non-vegan or a vegan. The point is that when you're vegan, you're not intentionally causing unnecessary animal suffering. Now, in response to you making those claims, the woke thing for me to have done would have been for me to say, "Ha, you silly non-vegan, do your research, do the work." But I did not do that, now did I? I have already done the work, and I shared with you what I know, along with trusted sources. Often, when we receive new information, we try to reject it because it conflicts with our old beliefs. But as Africa Brooke writes so eloquently in her post here, we must at some point get rid of this cotton wool that we've wrapped around our old beliefs if we truly want true change. Again, I will clarify that Africa Brooke made this post as a general point, but it's true nonetheless, and it applies here. If you need even more information, I would suggest looking through the other videos on my YouTube channel. I have covered many popular refutations to veganism. A lot of the time, I am responding to people who play identity politics. I respond to woke anti-veganism. So I sort of play their own game back at them. I play identity politics right back at them, even though I really dislike identity politics. Other times, I'm responding to people who are just baselessly referring to vegans as snowflakes. So I sort of played their game back at them. By contrast, you seem like a genuinely nice person. So I tried to be as genuinely nice as possible with you while being completely honest with you. If you'd like to watch a more direct case for veganism being made, then watch this video that I made earlier. To all my viewers, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by supporting the channel via Patreon. You receive exclusive benefits in return, and you can do that by clicking this link. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I'll see you there.